And now I'm pleased to introduce our speaker from York Support Services Network. The webinar today, I'd like to note, is offered in partnership with Developmental Services Ontario. Cindy Hartman, who's joined us on video, is a family peer mentor and supports caregivers of individuals with developmental disabilities. She'll tell you a little bit more about her personal caregiving experience, but I can tell you that Cindy supports families and individuals in the area of education, medical law enforcement, and social services. She developed the world's first ASD suicide prevention curriculum with the York ASD Partnership and the Mental Health Collaborative. Welcome, Cindy. So nice to see you again.
Thank you, Susan, for that introduction and for giving me this opportunity to present on behalf of the OCO. Welcome, everyone. I'm glad you're able to join us today on this webinar on 10 tips of sustaining your self-care during the holidays. My hope is that you will come away with something by the end of this seminar. But before we begin, I wanted to be able to just tell you a little bit about myself. I know Susan described some of my professional background, but for me, what's most important is I'm a caregiver first and foremost, just like many of you are. I'm a proud mother of a 23-year-old son who has autism, Tourette's, and OCD. And when my son was younger and growing up, many people from staff from the school really thought that he wasn't going to end up graduating with a regular high school diploma because of many challenges that he had. In fact, he never even went to school full time. So it was quite a surprise to many people, but of course not to me as his mother, that he not only graduated from high school with a diploma, but he is currently in university doing his last year of undergraduate work, pursuing a degree in cognitive neuroscience. And his hope is to get a doctorate, and he's currently focusing his research on ASD. So I'm very, very proud of him, and it's kind of come full circle. And so I know all of you are joining us today to learn some tips and strategies, because we all know that the holidays can be really stressful. And in particular for caregivers like ourselves, it's just a lot of added stress, and we often end up feeling very overwhelmed. And we have very little time for self-care. In fact, some of us don't even realize that, the importance of self-care. And so I often tell my client caregivers, I use the analogy of the airplane oxygen mask rule. I'm sure many of you, when you've flown, we've all heard the flight attendant use some variation of this rule, where she says, should the cabin lose pressure, oxygen masks will come down from the overhead area. So please place the mask first over your own mouth and nose before assisting others. So what we've learned is that this analogy shows us that you won't be effective in taking care of your loved one's needs until you take care of yourself first. So today, let's learn how to put on some of that oxygen mask with some tips and strategies so that we learn effective ways to reduce stress, improve your well-being, and find the joy of the holiday season. Before we begin, I wanted to be able to let you know that the 10 tips that you see on the slide in front of you, these are things that I've personally learned over the years. And in particular, I've learned many things from my client caregivers. And so over time, this is what I thought was my top 10 of what's helped me the most in sustaining my self-care during the holidays. So let's review them. Tip 1, make a plan. 2, make time for yourself. 3, make room for grief. 4, understand your negative emotions. 5, reflect on gratitude. 6, find reasons to laugh. 7, let others help. 8, stay connected. 9, have perspective. And 10, practice self-compassion. I know any list looks overwhelming. I get overwhelmed when I look at a list, but I don't expect you to follow all top 10 tips. If all you can do is practice one, that's okay, because sometimes one leads to another. And so hopefully you'll be able to take away just even one tip. So let's begin. Tip 1, make a plan. Have a plan A and a backup plan C, and even a backup plan B, and a backup plan C. Use the KISS strategy, which stands for Keep It Simple Strategy. Plan A may look like, having your immediate family over for the holidays. And so, but because of where you live, sometimes those restrictions, there's restrictions on numbers. So if you can't have your family over for the holidays, maybe you need to go into Plan B. Plan B, maybe you're getting together over Zoom. And if technology fails, make sure you have a Plan C for people whose technology fails on them and they fall off, so that they can still be part of the festivities and still join in and just be able to call in. My family every year gets together, and I've got a pretty big family. There's about 50 to 100 of us that gathers every year. And so during one of the gatherings, we all contribute by bringing a potluck type dish. And so what we've decided this year, since we all can't get together, is that we are going to do a variation of Uber Eats. So every family is going to create a dish and share it with other families. And we've got 3 designated drivers in our families, and so they will pick up and deliver all the different meals to all of the different families. And usually it's just going to be an appetizer, side dish, or dessert. And we call it Family Eats instead of Uber Eats. Maybe try reducing your expectation. For my family, what we've decided that we weren't going to give gifts to the extended family, that gift giving was going to just stay within the immediate family. And so that really helps a lot in trying to reduce what the expectations are for the holidays. Next, maybe identify what your priorities are. Not everybody necessarily will agree on what they want most out of the holidays, and that's okay. What's important is that everybody just kind of comes to a common denominator of what's most important to their family. And so my family, every holiday, we like to have fun. So we actually have a theme. And so last year, for instance, our theme was the 80s. So everybody dressed in 80s attire. And so that was a lot of fun. And this year, because we wanted to reduce the ability to get dressed up too much, we're all staying in our onesies. And another thing is you want to try and set some boundaries. And so my boundary is there's no cell phone during the holiday meal or during gift giving. I really want everybody to be present and mindful when we are doing those traditions. And finally, make a calendar with realistic timeframes. In fact, in this calendar, if you can just build in one small form of self-care, even if it's just for 5 minutes per day, that would really be able to help out in reminding you the importance of taking care of yourself. Tip 2, make time for yourself. As you see on this slide, we've got mindfulness and meditation. And so, but first, what is mindfulness? Mindfulness is focusing on the present and not on the past or the future. We all know that something like a simple breath awareness of maybe just practicing it 3 to 5 minutes a day can really help reduce our stress. And I don't know if many of you know this, but how we breathe can actually change the way you feel. When you breathe in deep and slow, it actually can cause relaxation. And when you take quick, shallow breaths, it causes your body to go into stress mode. In fact, deep, slow breathing stimulates what's called the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve then triggers something to calm your body down. And the other added benefit, it also strengthens your lungs. And we all know it's so much more important this year due to COVID to have strong lungs. So we really understand the importance of breath. And for those of you who have very little time, or you want something very quick because you're really stressed out, try just taking 3 deep breaths or even square breathing, where for 4 seconds each, you inhale, hold, exhale, hold. Another great thing to do is physical exercise. Maybe try taking a walk in nature where you can breathe in the fresh air, or try some yoga, or even dancing. Dancing is one form of exercise that I absolutely love because it doesn't even feel like I'm exercising. I like to listen to the 80s music because it brings me back to my teen years. And then plus on top of that, it makes me feel young again. And for those of you, because we all know in many of the areas, the gyms are closed. And so I like to be able to use an app when I'm at home. And so I use the daily yoga app every other day. And then the other days, I like using the 7-minute Johnson & Johnson app because all you need is 7 minutes and you get a full body workout. Next tip in this tip, making time for yourself, is relaxing. You can relax, and I like to be able to create a mini spa retreat. On the slide, it says you take a bath, or you can read a book, or even listen to music. And so for me, I like to combine all of those all in one. And so I love taking warm bubble baths. Then I put in a little bit of aromatherapy oils, some candles, and some soft music. And for those of you who have trouble relaxing, maybe try a meditation or de-stressing app. I personally use the Calm app. And so when I go to sleep, I like listening to someone read me a story. And so I usually put on Matthew McConaughey because he's got a nice deep voice and he always ends up lulling me to sleep. Or you can try 10% Happier, which is a meditation for fidgety skeptics, or Headspace, or even Relax Now. You can also try engaging in your hobby, maybe cooking, arts and crafts, or even maybe watching a movie. For me, every holiday season, I make chocolate truffles to give away as gifts. And so my son helps me make them, although I think he actually eats more of them than he actually helps make them. And so when I'm done making them, I then go out to the dollar store and I try and pick up some small festive tins and put the holiday truffles in them to give away as gifts. Maybe try learning to do something new. My son was always fascinated with different languages because he's multicultural. And so one year we decided to learn how to say happy holidays in 10 different languages. Maybe try learning another cultural tradition and maybe incorporating that into your own holiday. Also, cry. This one I absolutely love because it helps release pent up stress. And I also find it very cathartic and therapeutic. I normally end up scheduling my cry session to every Friday night, and boy, do I look forward to my Friday nights. And finally, smile. Did you know that just smiling, it releases tiny molecules in your brain called neuropeptides. And then the neuropeptides triggers neurotransmitters called endorphins, serotonin, and dopamine. And endorphins acts like a mild pain reliever. Serotonin is a natural antidepressant, and dopamine, it just makes us feel good. A famous motivational speaker that I'm sure most of you have heard, Tony Robbins, uses the phrase, motion creates emotion. So the physiological act of smiling creates the psychological feeling of joy. So maybe just try it and see how it feels. Tip 3, Make room for grief. Many of us, especially this year, are suffering a lot of grief due to the pandemic. We're reminded of people who may have passed away, people in our past, whether it be family, friends from a long time ago, and in some situations, maybe it's a divorce, and even people in our lives in the present. But because of the pandemic, we can't spend time with them this holiday season in person. This reminds me of my stepmother. 10 years ago, I lost her, and we were very close. And especially during the holidays, nobody loved the holidays more than my stepmother, Nancy. So every year, our tradition is, since she's passed, is to share a funny memory of her, because every holiday season, she loves playing jokes and telling funny stories to everyone. And so we like to sit around and try and remember that. And so there's also grief for traditions, for both past and present. Maybe you can start a holiday jar. Maybe it's a good idea that sometime in December, I would probably try and target maybe 5 to 7 days of where you write down on a little piece of paper the name of your immediate loved one, and then one positive thought about them. Then fold it up and place it in the holiday jar. And so hopefully you can collect almost a week's worth of different positive thoughts about each family member. And then on the actual day of your celebration, each person just randomly picks out of the jar and reads out loud that positive thought. Tip 4, understand your negative emotions. Some of you may be feeling overwhelmed, sadness, pity for yourselves, or even jealousy of others. I know my son and I are really sad this year because our family from California can't join us. And that's been a tradition for many, many years. And so we were really hoping that the border restrictions would be lifted, but we understand that that can't happen. And so we wanted to be able to just say, you know what, we know that this, is not going to be the same, but we'll try and see them on Zoom instead. So that way we can still, join them for the holidays. And for some of you, maybe your holiday goals are too ambitious, or maybe you have unrealistic expectations of yourself. I know for myself personally, I'm a self-proclaimed type A personality, and I'm the type of person that just wants the perfect holiday. And so whether it's the decor or whether it's the meal or whether it's the gifts, I put a lot of pressure on myself. So I end up feeling very stressed and overwhelmed during the holidays. So one year, I just decided that, you know what, I wasn't feeling the joy of the holiday season anymore. And I really wanted to get back to that. So I decided to reduce my expectations and really change things and do things that were more reasonable and doable so that it was less stressful on myself and that I started feeling a little bit more of that joy. I'm still a work in progress, but I know that some years I am better at it than others. Also, identify why you feel the way that you do. Maybe try saying it out loud. And for some, maybe it's writing it down. Just remember, you can release the hold of that negative emotion and take away its power. Last year, I took a training course at CAMH called Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, also known as ACT. And it was specifically for caregivers of those with a loved one with autism. And so what I learned in ACT was to acknowledge and accept my feelings without judgment or labels. So there really wasn't such a thing as a negative emotion or a positive emotion. It was just an emotion. Then I learned to try and look at what my core values were and what was most important to me. And so by recognizing what was important, I then aligned my responses to them. So it's not the emotion that counts. What matters most is your response and your action to them. Also try imagining a balloon over your head with whatever negative thoughts they may be. And then just try imagining that you cut the string and those negative thoughts float away. And for your loved ones who maybe have a little bit more difficulty using this imagination, maybe try doing it visually by drawing out the balloons floating away with some negative thoughts. Tip 5, reflect on gratitude. What are some of the positive outcomes of a gratitude practice? It improves physical health, psychological health, mental strength, sleep, increases empathy, self-esteem, and social connection. So it's really important to try and practice a gratitude exercise. Some people like to practice gratitude in the day, some people at night, or sometimes even both. If you start your day with gratitude, it will often set up your day in a positive frame of mind. Or you can end your day with gratitude by thinking of some positive thoughts and what you're thankful for. And often it will help you, have a more peaceful sleep. I personally like to wake up an extra 10 or 15 minutes early in the morning, where all I do is just lay there for the first 5-10 minutes and just feel the warmth of my bed and the blanket. Then I slowly start focusing on the outside and listen to the birds chirp. And I'm so grateful when I see the sun out. And then I'm really, really grateful that in a few minutes I get to have my cup of coffee. And so I also have a bedtime practice. When my son was younger, we would always talk about 3 things that we were grateful for before we went to bed. And now that he's older, we've just pivoted that practice to our dinner time instead. Tip 6, find reasons to laugh. We know that humor and laughter is an effective stress reducer, and it also helps us cope through challenging situations. I'm sure many of you heard that humor is the best medicine. So maybe try reading a fun book like Holidays on Ice, or sing a funny song like Grandma Got Run Over by the Reindeer, or something from Alvin and the Chipmunks, or even try playing a silly game like charades or twisters, or even try watching a funny show or movie. In my family, every year we like to watch Elf and Home Alone. Elf, we get reminded of Will Ferrell's childlike excitement to the holidays. And then in Home Alone, well, I think we all remember when Macaulay Culkin accidentally got left home alone by his parents because they were so busy preparing for the holidays. And then all of the funny antics he went through being all alone. Well, hopefully, I'm sure none of you have been in that position where you left your loved one home alone. Just doing any one of these things can help your feeling of stress and feeling overwhelmed. So just try even one thing. Tip 7, let others help. We caregivers can often be a very stubborn lot, and we think to ourselves, it's just easier to do it myself. I know sometimes I have a problem asking for help, but remember, when people offer help, they often do mean it. So take advantage of it, let them help. And then it's also important to be specific about what you need. They can't read your mind, and they don't know what's important to you. What's important to you may look different to somebody else. And so be specific. And it's also important to set boundaries. Without setting boundaries, something that was supposed to be helpful can all of a sudden be stressful, simply because they didn't know that that was a boundary for you. So my personal help list this year due to the pandemic is to get help picking up gifts curbside and also delivering some gifts and also preparing a side dish, taking my son's allergies into consideration. Tip 8, stay connected. This is really important, especially for your immunity, your health, and longevity. And so when I look at what are certain things that you can do to stay connected, is maybe have a self-care buddy. This is someone that you should be open and honest and vulnerable with. And so that when you fall, they're able to help pick you back up again and guide you back to your self-care. I use my 2 best friends and my colleagues, Sherry and Sue, for this. Maybe remember that the holidays is for connecting with family and friends. And since we can't see many family and friends in person, maybe try connecting by Zoom. For me, every year, my sisters and I take my mother out for tea time. But since we can't do that this year, we're going to have a Zoom tea time. Maybe try joining a peer mentor or a support group. And so at our monthly support group, we have one specifically for caregivers called Caregivers Connecting. Also try reaching out to a support group, maybe for your loved one with a disability. There are some called Let's Connect, and they have some support groups that are based on age, whether you're a young adult or an older adult. And also for siblings, it's important for them to be able to also get support. And so a support group for siblings might be the virtual sibling meetups. And so you will get some of this information on and the links to some of these support groups in the chat box. Or maybe you can try joining a holiday event. Last year, we threw a how to make a floral holiday centerpiece. And many of our caregiver participants started getting emotional, and many of them felt that feelings of isolation, and to be able to be in a room full of other caregivers where they felt that really kind of understood many of the emotions they were going through was really helpful for them. But also the other thing that we ended up finding out that was fun. Many of them said they hadn't had fun in a really long time, and it was something that they were really grateful. In fact, even the florist ended up getting emotional because she didn't realize how much impact it had on our caregivers. You can also try maybe volunteering, or maybe because it's the pandemic, giving to the food bank and the shelters. And so because you can't do it right now this year the traditional way, maybe you can find other ways by maybe just dropping off some items. Remember, it's better to give than to receive. Sometimes by helping others, it gives us a better perspective of our own. Because COVID, a lot of people could end up being alone. So maybe invite someone that's alone into your Zoom holiday gathering. My son, he is giving some of his money to a family in Africa to help buy a goat for them so that they can have some milk for the days to come. Tip 9, have perspective. Remember, the holiday season is short-lived. The holiday stress will pass and end. And focus on the positive moments. We know this year is unlike any other year. And so, but we also know that it is going to be short-lived, that we're hoping that next season we can all gather together, that eventually this pandemic will end. I know last year when I had the flu, I was really, really stressed out. And I was so sick that I could do nothing. I couldn't pick up the gifts, I couldn't decorate the house, or even help with the meal preparation. And I had family and guests coming in from out of town. And so I just realized I just have to let everybody just kind of take care of themselves. And you know what? They did. And I thought that the holidays were going to be a total disaster, but they ended up all picking up the slack, and it turned out to end up being one of the most relaxing holidays I ever had. So just by changing my perspective, I ended up finding that, you know what? It was great to be able to not have to do anything at all. 10, practice self-compassion. According to Dr. Christine Neff, the author of Self-Compassion, it entails compassion to oneself in instances of perceived inadequacies, failure, or general suffering. And she breaks it down into 3 main components. Self-kindness, which is being warm towards oneself when we fail or feel inadequate. Common humanity, it's recognizing that suffering and personal failure is a part of the shared human experience. And finally, mindfulness, that the negative thoughts and emotions are observed with openness and acceptance in mindful awareness. I love this quote on self-compassion, where self-compassion is nurturing yourself with all the kindness and love you would shower on someone you cherish. We're often harder on ourselves than we are on others. We often show more self-compassion for family, friends, and even strangers than to ourselves. I know that many of the caregiver clients that we support often feel a lot of guilt that they haven't done enough for their children. And so, a lot of the times they say, what we coulda, shoulda, woulda done. And I know I myself have had this problem. My son's father is a psychologist, and I have an undergraduate degree in psychology, but yet it took us over 3 years to get the right diagnosis for my son. So I felt like I lost 3 valuable critical years in the beginning that could have helped in trying to get him the help that he needed. Finally, I realized and gave myself some forgiveness and practiced some self-compassion that I did the best that I could. Once I got to that place, I was able to let go of those emotions and was able to feel free to help foster my son's full potential. And finally, I'd like to end with this self-care quote. An empty tank will take you exactly nowhere. Take time to refuel. I know it's not easy to follow all the top 10 tips that we went over today. If all you can do is just do one, that's okay. Remember, some is better than none. Even one is better than none. So thank you everyone for joining me today on this webinar. And please stay on if you have any questions. And please remember, the holiday season is a time of joy and peace. May you all have that inner peace and joy within yourself. And I really hope and wish you all a happy holiday and best wishes for a happy new year.